So, hey everyone, we're back with another episode for this season for the SaaS Sessions podcast. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'd personally love to welcome you to a listener base of 17,000 people. Yes, we recently crossed 17,000 listeners a month back, and thank you for everybody who's tuning in. Without all of you who's listening to the show, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have hit this amazing milestone. So yeah, without further ado, let's look into who we have today on the show. We have Girish, was the co-founder of RecruiterBox, which was acquired by Turnover Capital in 2018. One company where if most of you would have applied for a role in any of the SaaS companies across the globe, you would have come across RecruiterBox. That's the applicant tracking system, product out there, one of the best in the business. So after that success, currently Girish is running Sprinto. Sprinto helps SaaS companies become InfoSec compliant. This is important for all the SaaS companies to unblock your sales deals and pass security reviews very easily without any hassle. So Girish, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and congratulations on crossing 17,000 subscribers.
Hey, thanks. I know we have been talking about doing this for a while, and it's so finally very happy to do it with you. So I gave a very short intro. I know since 2010 you have been running RecruiterBox, and for 8 years you've been running scaled up a company, a product which is so beautifully built, and had a great exit as well. And 2020 you started Sprinto, right? And there was a 2 years gap, and I know we spoke it off the record about the gap, and you had a lot of ideas, and Sprinto was one amongst 10-15 ideas that you folks had. So would love you to elaborate on the 8-year journey in short, if you can. I know there are a lot of things that we can particularly talk about the 8-year journey and how you did the exit and stuff like that. But yeah, can you tell us more about yourself and your journey that I just summarized?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, maybe I'll just talk about my story. If you had told me in college that I'm going to eventually do a tech startup, I would have laughed. I don't think that was anywhere part of my plans. I graduated. I was doing basically I had a couple of jobs which was largely around data analytics, and which simply meant that I was wrangling large spreadsheets and data sets and PowerPoints. This is what my job was like before we started working on RecruiterBox. RecruiterBox didn't immediately happen either. We spent a couple of years building a ton of stuff that nobody wanted. So we wasted and whiled a lot of time there. But in the process, we actually taught ourselves programming. So mind you, we didn't really learn programming as much. We were not computer science graduates, and we never professionally programmed. So we had to teach ourselves that, which was a very useful skill going forward. But it meant that we meandered along the line before we actually built something that people wanted. RecruiterBox was built in 2011. We had a third co-founder, Raj. We ran that from 2011 through the end of 2017, early 2018, at which point it was acquired. We grew RecruiterBox to more than 2,500 customers, most of who were in the US. I think about 70 to 80% of our customers were in the US. About 15 to 20% were in other English-speaking parts of the world, and about 5% of our customers were in India. So we were a truly global product in some way, while most of the team was run out of India. So in basically 2018, when RecruiterBox was acquired, we took a little bit of a break. Startups can tend to be fairly intense things, as we all know. And we were also looking at other things that we could do as our next startup. And I think we had about half a dozen ideas that we explored a little bit. Thankfully, we were a little less naive than we were in RecruiterBox, where we just dove in. So this time we did a bunch of interviews. We spoke to a ton of people trying to validate which of these problems were real problems, etc. Sprinto kind of stood out, because it was one of the things that we faced ourselves at RecruiterBox. So as RecruiterBox, we were trying to take the company more and more up market. We had to become SOC 2 and ISO compliant, and this is one of those things where it falls into the laps of whoever manages product and engineering in the company, which was again I and my co-founder at the time. So we got a front row seat to what these compliances mean, where they become painful, what the gotchas are, burnt our hands with it. I wouldn't say it was a very pleasant experience. So we knew this is a high pain, high value problem, because you need to do these compliances primarily in order to close enterprise deals, which is something that most SaaS companies would want to do, but it also becomes painful. So of the other problems, this somehow got validated in a lot of interviews that we did as well. So that's the long and the short of the thing. We started we started Sprinto in early 2020, and fast forward today, here we are.
That's amazing. And as you correctly said, right? Like you're diving into this the second time or the second company, Sprinto, with a lot of experience, right? And like starting from the company from zero to having a great exit, right? So being a second time founder, what was like the one key learning that you brought from your time at RecruiterBox into Sprinto from day zero?
I don't know if there's one key learning overall, because some of these things start becoming like your muscle memory. You sort of just grow as a person, and you sort of inculcate those things. But if there's one thing that I at least personally tried to always tell myself while we were beginning to do Sprinto, which I didn't have any clue about if I look back at the beginning of RecruiterBox, is that as engineers or people who can actually build products, it's very easy to get excited by and married to the solution and the product that you're building. And I think one of my biggest learnings from the entire RecruiterBox journey is to be it's rather better to be attached to the problem and married to the problem than being married to the solution. And the two things can mean very different things. Like when you're married to a solution, then you just hold that as the pivot, and you're looking around with it, and your entire lens is that. Whereas when you marry to a problem, and then your solutions can keep changing, and you could find different ways to attack it, and so on and so forth. But that's something that I consciously tell myself, to be a lot more focused to the problem space, and what is it that you're actually solving. How do your prospects or customers really look at it? What are their pain points? Then be excited by the thing that you are building. That's a way to solve that problem, but that's not the end in itself. And I know this sounds philosophical and maybe a little abstract, but this is one of those things that I need to tell myself, because I tend to be one of those people left to myself. If I have an idea, the next thing I would want to do is just start coding and building it out. That's my next immediate reaction. And to sort of build a discipline that, hey, you should ideally first talk to people, understand whether it's a real problem, see if it's like a top 3 problem for them, etc. Requires a certain bit of discipline, and that's something that I had to teach myself.
Yeah, I don't think it's philosophical at all, because I know in hindsight everybody would agree to it, right? That getting married to or getting attached to the problem is important, and not the not getting attached to the solution itself or the product itself, right? So yeah, I mean, like a lot of first time founders who probably are listening to the show would like this would be like their key learning for them, right? Like they could take away right from you. So cool. Again, talking about Sprinto and the compliance part, right? I'm sure selling to these 2,500 customers in the RecruiterBox, you might have yourself gone through a lot of security evaluations and getting all the compliances for these. Maybe not all of them, but definitely for the enterprise ones, as you mentioned. If you want to go up market, you want to sell enterprise, especially in the US, Europe, you need to have compliances, right? So just taking a very layman approach to the entire problem that you're solving. What are compliances, right? Like many founders do already know, and many people already are aware of this, but how do you explain compliances to somebody who's unaware of them?
That's a great question. Actually, I'm glad you asked that. So fundamentally, I think Andreessen Horowitz said that software is eating the world, and like anybody who is in our space, we all know that SaaS is eating software. So the simple world that we are living in is that SaaS software is replacing large swaths of software that's out there, and there's more and more SaaS software being built. Now, the thing to understand about SaaS software is that the fundamental premise of SaaS software is that my data is on your servers, right? And it is natural for me to want some assurance that you are keeping this data safe and secure, that data won't actually get lost or stolen or fall into the wrong hands when it's with you. And that's the fundamental premise of SaaS software, right? If I'm going to put my data on your servers, I need some assurance that you're keeping it safe. And this is, the necessity of this is only increasing given the amount of security breaches that we hear about, data getting leaked, lost, stolen, and all of those kind of things that are happening. So if you really think about it, in order for SaaS to grow, what is also important that this particular barrier, that happens happens when companies are sharing the data with you, this friction needs to reduce. And in the olden times, if you looked at this about, like a decade ago or earlier than that, the way companies would actually go about it is that they would actually audit each and every of their vendor. So about their security practices and to make sure that they are running the right security practices. And this is obviously inefficient, because I would have to do this for each and every of my vendor, and each and every of my vendor would have to do it for each and every of their customers. This just doesn't make sense. So what compliances are no different than how SATs or GREs are. Like, instead of you applying and doing these examinations separately with each school or college that you apply to, you do it with a trusted independent third party. So compliances like SOC 2 or ISO or any of these are these independent third parties that the world overall trusts. So you implement the security practices that you get yourself audited by these independent trusted third-party auditors, and they tell you that, hey, you abide by this. I'm giving you a report that says that you abide by these standards, and you can now take that report and give it to your customers, and they can trust this report because it's generated not by you. They're not taking your word for it. They're actually taking the word of an independent third party for it. And that's the whole premise of this business. So it's nothing but like a certification of the fact that you are keeping your customers' data safe and secure, and they consequently can do business with you. That's the simplest way to think about compliances.
That's really amazing. And I know it like becomes very important in terms of enterprises when you're closing the deal, right? Like, you're talking to somebody, and as you said, like, their data is going to be stored on our servers, right? Or your server as a company. So like it's mandatory for you to have these compliances, right? Now, once you have these compliances like registered, right? Like, what kind of compliances are there available in the market, and as a SaaS company, which ones you should go for? Because like there might be some standard ones, as you mentioned, the ISO ones, or getting GDPR compliant is a basic check that you have to do these days whenever you start a company or you start putting these pixels on your website and you start collecting data. But for particularly for enterprises, when you say these are the compliances, can you share any examples or any stories that you might have that while your time at RecruiterBox that you didn't have any compliances and you lost a deal, or what were the consequences of that?
Yeah. So, so first of all, like if I have to simply answer what are the compliances that you need, the unfortunate thing over there, it's not a simple answer. Like, it largely depends on the geography that you operate in, where your customers are, the industry that your customers are in, maybe even the customer segment that you might be dealing with. And there's a bunch of nuances over there. The important thing to understand there is that there are some very standard security practices, like a foundational program that you could actually run. And SOC 2 and ISO 27001 are the most commonly asked foundational programs that you would see in the market. And the simple rule of thumb is that if you are looking at US as one of your primary markets, you're looking at North America as your primary market, you are sooner or later going to get asked for SOC 2. It's very hard to do business in that market without SOC 2. And if you are looking at Europe or Asia Pacific as one of your markets, India, etc., then ISO 27001 starts becoming that thing. So these two frameworks have a lot of overlap in terms of the intent. They of course have different governing bodies and they have their own different rituals and so on and so forth. But in terms of the actual security practices that you would run, there is a fair bit of overlap. But the one you pick depends on the specific geo that you might be going after. Many SaaS companies, which are global SaaS companies, most SaaS companies tend to be global, will typically do both sooner or later. The second thing that's important to understand is that the floor at which you get asked for compliances is always dropping. So about at the time when we were doing this at RecruiterBox, and this was about 5 years ago when we first started looking at these things, this used to be asked for 6-figure deals and higher. So these are like in extremely large deals and larger companies who are actually asking you for this. But since then this floor has been dropping and dropping and dropping, and the reason that's happening is because these compliances are inherently a little transitive. What I mean by that is there are some changes that have happened in these compliances, which fundamentally means that if you are SOC 2 compliant as a SaaS company, you need to make sure that your critical vendors are SOC 2 compliant, which means that each of them need to make sure that their critical vendors are SOC 2 compliant, and this whole snowballing effect starts happening. Now, what that really means is that it's likely that you're getting asked for SOC 2 compliances for much smaller size deals even today, and that I anticipate that floor to keep falling more and more. So the question really is not whether you need this anymore as a SaaS company. You are sooner or later you're going to need this, and the exact one that you need just depends on the the nature of your business, the geography you operate in. You operating in Europe, you absolutely need GDPR. That's a law. That's not even like something that's optional for you. You operate in Canada, now you need people. California has CCPA. Every country is coming up with its own data privacy law. India is going to come up with its own. So these are increasingly going to happen.
Makes sense. Yeah, and totally agree with the point, right? The floor keeps dropping and it's like a snowball effect at Whatfix. So we used to sell to enterprises, and definitely we were ourselves SOC 2 compliance and the GDPR compliance and ISO compliant and all of that. But whenever we used to, as you rightly said, right, whatever products that we are purchasing to do marketing, like particularly I used to get involved in all the marketing products that we were procuring. So when we used to implement any marketing product, now even if they are a small company, as you said, like they're a small company selling to mid-market companies, for them, Whatfix is a mid-market company, right? And so now, since we are selling to enterprises, now because of that, it's like a snowball effect, which is passed on to them, transitive effect, that all these products, like even though they're not selling up market or not selling enterprise, we are asking them that, hey, this is a security questionnaire that you need to, do you have SOC 2 compliance report, or are you ISO certified and all of that, right? So it just at some point, it's not only up market, as you said, it will become mandatory at some point, right? And that's what I wanted to ask next, right? Was this the particular reason, right? As you said, software is eating the world, SaaS is eating the software. And because of the pandemic, there's been an acceleration in the kind of SaaS companies that have come up, right? And the number of SaaS companies that have come up that got funded and, that started doing like 20 million or 100 million revenue in like 20 months. Deal was one of them recently hit 100 million ARR. So again, was this like the reason, right? Like that you saw in the industry or this saw in the market, right? That the Sprinto as an idea that got picked up in like half a dozen ideas that you mentioned you had, right? Or what was the story behind, or what is the exact reason behind picking Sprinto? Was it the industry? Was it like every company focusing on implementing these software, or like some internal factors, or just the interview that helped you guys?
I guess it was a combination of factors. It definitely helps that, you're operating in a market that's growing. And we sort of, for some of the other ideas, for example, we debated, like my personal preference is to rather be in a space that's growing fast than a space that's already large. So I feel that spaces that are growing fast are the ones that allow for a lot more innovation, and there's a lot of froth there, and that allows smaller companies to sort of navigate it and execute faster. And that's one of the things that's very interesting about SaaS. And you're talking about MarTech tools, and it just occurred to me that I was just reading this example somewhere where there is somebody who does like a roundup of all marketing tools, and back in 2012 they did a lot of all the SaaS tools that exist around marketing, and there were about 350 products and companies that were there around that time. And fast forward to 2022, they did a landscape of all the marketing tools around it, and there are 8,500 companies in the martech space itself. So there is just a huge Cambrian explosion of the number of SaaS companies that is happening. And the thing that is most interesting about SaaS is that it's growing fast. We all know it's large, but the more important thing, it's growing fast. In fact, there's a report by Battery Ventures which says that SaaS is actually growing at an 18% CAGR. Now that's massive growth. Like anything that grows at an 18% CAGR means it doubles every 3 or 4 years. That's massive, right? So it's always more interesting to be in that space. So that was one of the factors. And I think the apart from the other things that you absolutely want to nail, which is it is a high order problem, it's a high pain problem, etc. I guess it helped that we had a personal connect to them, because we could actually put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are going into that problem, because we had been those people before. And at RecruiterBox, we absolutely kept pushing the can ahead to avoid doing compliances. It didn't seem like something that a technology company would want to do. It just seemed like boring, unsexy paperwork that didn't add any value in itself. It's just some label that you need to get just so in order to close that deal. But we eventually had to do it. So we're quite aware of the the emotions that people go through when they're purchasing this. The reason you actually do it is that you really feel hurt and pain that you have to let that enterprise deal go just because you don't have this compliance and you don't get a seat at the table where where you should ideally compete on the basis of the features of your product and the strength of your product. But then all of these other kind of things that start mattering, like, hey, are you compliant? And they start looking at you as if you are a very small non-worthy company because you don't actually have SOC 2 or ISO or whatever that might be, right? So we sort of deeply connected to the problem, which was the another important point in order to pick it.
Makes sense, yeah. And as you if anybody's wondering who about the market landscape, that is by Scott Brinker. Is that the one that you are referring to? The chiefmartech.com. Happy to include a link in the description for anybody who's looking that up. But yeah, great to know that lot of factors, as you mentioned, right? Like personal attachment or personal experience with the problem that you faced while at RecruiterBox, and being a part of a growing industry that is growing at 18% CAGR, and plus this particular product and this particular process or system keeps becoming more important, and it is becoming more common as well, right? Earlier it was just you want to sell to enterprises, you want to have these compliances, but today the world has changed, and even if you're not selling to enterprises, you should have it's become synonymous to a checklist item that when you start a company you should have these compliances, right? Depending on wherever you're selling across the globe. But yeah, great to know that. So apart from the compliances, right, are there any for Sprinto particularly, now you help with compliance, and is there any complementing services that you're planning to add in the future? Right? What's next for Sprinto? Is it just gonna be compliance? Is the product completely built out yet? I know it's just been 2 years, but since you've already researched, being a second-time founder, coming to the problem with experience and more expertise into it, and the industry is growing so much. But how does Sprinto help? Currently, it's helping with compliance, but what's the future plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way we look at this internally at Sprinto is that compliance is an answer to a problem, and the problem specifically that Sprinto tries to solve is to help companies go over the security review hurdle that actually happens whenever you're actually selling B2B software, and the growth of the company is going to be in more aspects of what's really involved in a security review. So we already added a new thing to Sprinto recently where we help you answer security questionnaires. So if anybody has gone through this journey of actually selling a B2B software, you also know that over and above these compliances, you get these questionnaires, and they run into hundreds and sometimes thousands of questions. And it's not fun to write them down. They'll kill you.
I remember sharing this set of questions when I was purchasing a software at Whatfix, and our InfoSec VP of InfoSec gave a sheet with 100, 150, 125 something questions, and we shared it with the team. And they were such a small company, as I said, and for them it was clueless, and they actually took a week or two, probably more than that, just to answer those and get back to us. At first they were okay, what is this? And why are we supposed to answer? But yeah, I mean, it's not much. After that moment, I felt getting compliances for companies is not as common as I was thinking it is. I mean, yes, it was common to all the companies that I was aware of, but when I actually was the buyer of a software and somebody was selling me, and since we are compliant, we need all the products that we use to be compliant as well. And when I saw the documentation first, blown away, the kind of complexity it has, crazy.
Yeah, and I would say that 120 questions is relatively not that bad. The median number of questions that you usually get here is easily above 500, and that's the kind of questionnaires. So I've personally sat down and answered questionnaires which run into 1,500 questions and so on and so forth. So they can become really, really large. They're not fun. They suck away all the joy that is there in running a SaaS company. And but this is part and parcel of actually selling software today. So we actually at Sprinto have a service that helps you answer these questions. And what I'm trying to point out to is that there is a lot of moving pieces when it actually comes to the security review. There's the security questionnaire, there's these compliances. You sometimes actually have to still undergo an audit from your partners or your stakeholders. So if you're working with a bank, for example, they actually conduct audits, and these happen over asynchronously or over Zoom nowadays, but those still are pretty, they're pretty demanding. And there are things that we are doing in order to potentially help you do that. We can help you, paint a public security posture, using which, at least for your smaller deals, you don't have to do bespoke work or show a compliances, but you could actually, market your security posture immediately. And there's a bunch of work that can happen in this space. But, the way I look at this is, and this goes back to what I was saying about getting married to the problem than the solution. Compliances is a way of solving the problem. And the problem you're really trying to solve is to create some assurance around the security practices that you have. And that takes various forms. It could be security questionnaires. It could be portraying like your security posture on your website, to being more transparent about what your security practices are, and so on and so forth. And our end goal, the way we look at it, our mission of the company is to become the trust currency for all cloud commerce, right? So this is the thing that compliances or questionnaires or anything else solves. They are about building trust around the fact that your data is going to be safe. And we want to tackle all the problems that fall into that. Now, that means a bunch of things. I don't think compliances themselves are a completely solved problem yet. The breadth of compliances that we cater to is increasing. We already cover about 15 compliances, which is the broadest group from anybody in the industry. So, and that's important because every SaaS company today is a global SaaS company, and the number of compliances that you need to adhere to is only going to increase. Every country is coming up with its own privacy laws. You have. I was just talking about this earlier. Europe has GDPR. UK has its own version of GDPR. There's UK GDPR. There's PIPEDA in Canada. There's CCPA in California. 3 or 4 more states within the next year in the US are going to have their own privacy laws. India is going to come up with its own privacy law, and the number of compliances that you have to adhere to is itself going to keep on expanding. And Sprinto is going to cover them all. And we have a very unique way of covering them all, which means that you don't necessarily have to do extra work or 0 to 1 work for each and every new. We actually implement a core security and a privacy program, which you can reuse when you're doing more compliances, right? And that makes your life a lot easier. So just stepping a couple of steps back, what I'm trying to get to is that the way we look at this, our job is to help you get over the security review, and whatever is involved in that is our problem. That's a problem, that's a customer's problem, and consequently it's our problem. So the way we look at it is our job is to help you with any of those things.
Got it. Very, very interesting take on that. And I was just browsing the Sprinto's website as well. And also, I should have done this right at the start, but yeah, congratulations on the Series A. And while I was reading the article on the website for that, you did mention a very interesting phrase, right? Which is compliance-led growth. Right. So from whatever we discussed, I do know that compliance can be a very passive thing, that when it's asked, we do work on it, right? Where you have to do all these testing of your software, and you have to produce these reports, right? It's mostly active only when the ones you get the report and it's done, right? That's there. But as you mentioned, if you're working with certain kind of industries or certain kind of companies like banks, for example, there are continuous checks that might happen, which might happen any time of the month, any time of the quarter, any time of the year, and you have to be prepared, right? And those are the cases where these compliances might become more active, right? Instead of being passive. Or that is one way. And secondly, for many salespeople, when the deal is way through the stages, they're like the product, and now as a salesperson that it's, hey, I should probably bring compliance on my side, right? It should play an active role in closing the deal, and not only a passive role that, yeah, okay, if they ask for compliance, or when they ask for compliance, I'll probably bring the certificates up and I'll share it with them. So again, it was the compliance-led growth phrase particularly an indication towards making compliances more active from a passive state as they are today? Was that the case when this phrase came to your mind?
Yeah. So you bring up a very important point that, conventionally, historically, compliance is used as a defensive tactic, right? If you ask it, I have it. And consequently, I somehow climb over that barrier that is, a security review. But I'm increasingly seeing some of the good sales companies or companies who do this really well use compliance as a part of their sales strategy. So they actually lead with compliances. They actually go upfront, the second slide in the deck would be that, hey, by the way, we are backed by so and so, and we're compliant by these frameworks, and we take security seriously. And the idea that you're trying to paint over there is that this is not an afterthought for us. We take your data seriously. This is something that we put front and center into our in the way we actually build out our products, and this is something that's important for us, right? So
Right.
Instead of it becoming like a checkbox, that's something that you say, yes, I have it, when being asked for it, you actually lead with it. You paint that confidence, and you actually start looking a lot more formidable. And this is extremely important, especially for smaller startups who are trying to grow as of now, where you get all of these proxy questions. How large are you, how long have you been around, and so on and so forth. These are all proxies for them trying to find out, are you serious? Are you going to be around tomorrow? Are you going to run away just what I have, and stuff like that? And compliances and your security measures are like a great way of countering that upfront, rather than just keeping it in the bag in case you get asked for those things. So we definitely recommend a lot of our customers to actually put it front and center, talk about it on their website, be transparent about it, and actually make it a part of their sales game. And this is increasingly important as you go out, because even if you are not doing it, your competition is doing it. It's important to get ahead of them at that point of it.
Totally. So very, very interesting take, and very interesting phrase as well, right? Compliance-led growth. I mean, you have seen product-led growth and product-led sales and what event-led growth very recently. But this is like a first one, compliance-led growth, and definitely getting more active on the compliance side rather than just being passive, right? It will be even more active as it is today in the coming years for sure. So I think we have reached the course for this episode, and let's move on to the lightning round, where I'm going to put you on the spot for 3 questions, where you have to answer with whatever's on top of your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So the first one, what's the one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
I've learned to read faster.
Amazing. Oh, yeah. Okay. I think second one, like what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
I don't know. I guess it would be that, to get anything right, the amount of repetitive, tedious, disciplined work that's required, as against like a brainwave, the fractions are completely inverted in my head. I think if you had asked me back in college and when I started working, I used to feel that it was more about, getting that inspiration, that brainwave, that idea, and those kind of things. And it's completely opposite in my head now. That's a very small part of, getting something right.
Yeah, execution, more focus on the execution.
Yes.
Yeah, it's always the case. And the last one, right? Who is someone that inspires you and why?
That's a tough one.
I know there are many people for like always there are like there cannot be one, but if you want to name like anyone.
I guess it's my dad. I think what I find most inspiring about him is that he's always been a very curious person, and that's one of the things that's probably rubbed off of me. And with even not too many things at his disposal, he had this natural curiosity around everything that's around him, and a sense of wonder around the things that were around him. And he had a much harder life than I did, financially and otherwise, but the way he would still sort of keep that flame alive, to have that kind of curiosity and wonder, and this thing about finding things out is something that is always stayed with me. So that's something that I admire, that quality a lot. So that's very inspiring for me.
That's really amazing, Girish. To be honest, this is the 93rd episode I'm recording, and in all the previous 92 episodes, none of the people have mentioned their family. So this is like the first one, like where you mentioned your dad and somebody from your family that inspires you. I mean, like our inspirations is there, like right from when we were kids and when we were young, and they're just all around us, and not only from the SaaS industry, particularly, or from the tech or startup world. But anyway, this is really great, and great to know that your father is the inspiration for you, and I think it's been there since the start. So yeah, amazing. So yeah, thanks a lot, Girish, for taking time and doing this. I mean, I really appreciate it, and lot of insights. I mean, taking compliances from explaining it to a layman like me who doesn't understand it, it's personally a huge learning to understand the consequences, particularly on what happens if you don't have those, right? That is like the number one thing that I would focus on if ever I start my company.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
I really enjoyed being here.